Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Thursday, July 18th. We're recording a little early this week just because I'm joined by my colleague, Josh Molina, host of Santa Barbara Talks, the world's greatest podcast. And we are very pleased to welcome back to the show Supervisor Laura Capps, who, as you all recall, was an original cast member of Newsmakers back before the last ice age. I don't think we've had you on since you became a supervisor. Welcome back to the show.
I think I have been, but thanks. Glad it was so memorable.
Okay, all right. I remembered to turn it on today, so that's okay. That's
My son, when he was young, he called it news smackers.
Hey, listen, I want to get to the big news about Isla Vista, which you've been spearheading, but I have to ask before we start, given your background in national politics, can you talk me off the ledge about the presidential election or not? Because if you can't, I don't know who can.
Well, I do because I'm in my supervisor office, and Jerry, I know that you care that in our state constitution, every local office is nonpartisan. So I actually, now that I've done the job for about 16 months, I can attest to the fact that the work is really nonpartisan. So I will answer as a Democrat citizen, but just to be clear, my job is
Absolutely.
and I really, but I don't say that just to be Pollyanna. Like I do really work that anyway. So as a Democrat, yeah, I'm with you. I'm on the ledge. It's bad. It's been a bad 3 weeks. It just keeps getting worse. And 4 months is a long time to go to election. So there's that. But there's a lot of other things to focus on. But it's not looking good for Joe Biden. That's for sure.
No, and you couldn't write. Sorry, the grandkids are here. You couldn't write a script that would be worse. Seriously, dog the kids. I mean, Trump's fans like that he's indicted. You know, the guy tried a coup. Supreme Court says, oh, he's got immunity. You know, Biden self-destructs. Then he gets almost shot. I mean, it's like a bad movie. But let me ask you this. The Democrats have a real problem with gerontocracy. I think we saw this in terms of Dianne Feinstein, and certainly we're seeing it with President Biden. Your mother, former Representative Lois Capps, was someone who I think recognized that it was time for somebody younger to do the job, and so I really commend her for that. But what's the deal with the Democratic gerontocracy?
Yeah, it completely contradicts, I think, what the kind of the ethos of our party, which is about the next generation and forward thinking and diversity and freedom of thought and expression. Then you have, so many of the national representatives, at least, who are just holding on. And I am proud of my mom for having seen, she got out, she retired from Congress on her own accord at 79 in full steam, and then also too, she's really just retreated. I mean, she loves participating and watching, but she's not trying to sort of stay relevant, if that makes sense. I can hear that now, but yeah, we'll see. This whole passing of the torch needs to happen.
Yeah. All right. Josh, did you have a question about?
Yeah, Supervisor Capps, and thanks, Jerry, for allowing me on the show for this episode, because I'm always grateful to appear, especially when we're talking with the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Capps, I wanted to ask you, I get it as a journalist. There's all this, I get all these emails, all these phone calls, these texts. There's such vitriol. The people who love former President Trump are going to love him no matter what. Right? It doesn't matter. And the people who despise Trump are always going to despise him. And now we have, after the debate, the situation with Joe Biden and people calling for him to step down and allow someone else to run. Otherwise, Trump is going to win and get elected again. So separating all of the vitriol and all of the distaste that so many people, liberals, Democrats, have for Trump, if he were to win, right? If he were to get elected, notwithstanding who he is as a person, which is, a terrible person, like, what do you think it means to people here in Santa Barbara County, in California? If he actually wins as a practical matter, other than him just being this awful person, what does this mean to our lives in terms of policy or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do, the real stuff is really serious and challenging and devastating, for our immigrants and the fear, and for people, trans people, so many people vulnerable populations that live in fear anyway. And then this is just exacerbated by the draconian measures that are likely to fall. And you remember, I just was elected to the school board in 2016, and those were dark days. Those are days when people weren't showing up at neighborhood clinics. They weren't showing up for the free meal programs that I was a part of, out of pure fear of ICE and pure fear. And so we have to do our effort. I mean, that's the bad news, right? That scenario. And I sure hope it doesn't happen again. And I sure hope we rally again and again. 4 months is a long time from now, and it's clearly possible. The upside is we have so many activists. I mean, you interviewed Suzanne Cohen not too long ago. Democratic Women is on fire, and they're organizing and writing postcards into to swing districts in California, but also, Wisconsin. We had Tammy Baldwin. I mean, there's so much activism that I haven't seen locally for national politics, at least in my political life here. So there's so many ways to plug in that folks like Democratic Women are making it very easy to do so, and making it fun, showing up and sitting around with a bunch of people writing postcards. And the data shows that postcards really do help. If someone gets a postcard reminding them to register to vote, or reminding them about a judge election, that they're more apt to do it. So activism is really good. And I'll just say too, on the vitriol, I said this at the beginning of our board hearing on Tuesday, our county and for the most part, our local government is really the antithesis of what you see nationally. And we're just going to keep that going. Not because anyone's telling us to. It's really the character of what we do here in Santa Barbara County. And I'm really proud of it. It continues. It's been a wonderful surprise and delight to work on the Board of Supervisors, because our meetings are actual meetings. Like, we're deliberating. We're bouncing ideas off up there. It's not just sort of going down the line and everybody saying their piece and then voting. I mean, certainly we do have that from time to time, but on the tough stuff like cannabis tax, we sat back and we were wrangling with this thing for 3 hours, and it was constructive. It was respectful. It can get heated, but it's heated within bounds. So I just offer that as perhaps a silver lining, that locally we've got something pretty special here, and I don't see that changing regardless if Trump wins.
No, that's a very good point, because on the ground, that's what's going to affect us the most. And
yeah, and we live in California, where a lot of these rights will be protected, and we have
which will be target number one also. We could talk more about that another day. All right, I want to talk. I do want to pivot to local stuff, because you've been very visible and very active and very energetic, trying to help with problems in IV since you got into office. And I just wanted to take note of a big victory that not only the county, but I think you personally as well, won with the settlement of this lawsuit against the university. And the county's going to get what, $3.7 million earmarked toward forward-thinking, transformational quality of life and safety improvements, as someone put it. Talk about where the money came from real quick, but then what are we gonna do with it?
Yeah, well, why it matters. I mean, Josh has done a lot of good reporting on this. I mean, housing in Isla Vista impacts housing in the county, and people don't necessarily realize it, especially if you got your house in the 70s. But if the fact that UCSB hasn't built housing for their students has had this ripple effect negatively on the rest of the county, because traditionally low-income areas of Isla Vista and potentially Goleta, students have had to spill into those areas, taking up important low-income housing stock And then families who are working hard get pushed, to Lompoc and further, and then they're on the highways separated from their kids at school. So it just has had this snowball negative effect, UCSB's lack of housing. And so my predecessors, Greg Hart and also Supervisor Hartman on the board and the whole board sued UCSB. And that was bold. It was aggressive. The city of Goleta did too. And it worked because they settled, and they settled in our favor. And the most important piece is that UCSB will build housing. They have to build 3,500 units in the next couple of years. And if they don't, there's stiff penalties, $1 million if they're a month late, 2 million if there's, another few months more. So they'll build. And then with that came $3.7 million to help Isla Vista. And that's where my team got to kind of figure out what are the top priorities. And we came up with, I think, a great plan. I'm really excited about it.
Talk about some of the specifics as it relates to tenants, renters,
Yeah.
as well as the bluff safety issues you've been working on.
Yeah, well, thanks. If you went to UCSB or your kids go there now, that, students are being charged exorbitant, crazy prices. You go on Zillow, you can check it out. It's like $12,000 for a 3-bedroom place that's not very well maintained. And so students really feel the squeeze again, because there's such competition. And so they're paying these crazy rents for substandard housing in a lot of cases. And yet younger tenants and low income tenants are traditionally not likely to go notice a violation. So the county doesn't do anything, has no role to play with these substandard conditions. So we're trying to make that easier for tenants by actually going and proactively inspecting rental units just in Isla Vista, not throughout the county. It's just a pilot project in Isla Vista that will be paid for by UCSB. And that means we'll go in, the county inspector will actually go in.
So what, is it Department of Health or what?
It's in building and planning. It's in building inspection. And so they'll notice things like black mold. They'll notice things like if a balcony is not safe for the many tenants that hang out there. They'll notice if 5 people are in a 2-bedroom place and it's only, leased for 2 people or 4 people, or if people are in garages that have been converted without windows, all that stuff that's not legal. And this doesn't kick in hopefully till next summer. So we're going to do our job of promoting it so that hopefully a lot of the problems get resolved without this course of action, right? So hopefully tenants do the right thing. They make those repairs this summer when they might not be fully stocked, and make sure that it's better standards. It's really, I spend a lot of time just going door to door in Isla Vista. Students are so welcoming, and they have so many stories to share. We did a town hall just to hear more of these stories, because every time I go out there, I hear something new, like, oh, wow, I didn't get my security deposit back because they said I broke the oven. We didn't use the oven, like these horror stories. And I think if parents knew that their kids were living, sure, it's beautiful and they have an ocean view, but a lot of these places are really not well cared for. That's a nice word.
Or as our colleague Nick Welsh put it, the students are fish in a barrel for the landlords, and now you're arming the fish.
I'm trying. It's just it's a piece of the big housing crisis. That's what I see. And it's a piece that I can impact. Housing is so daunting. Low-income housing is so daunting. So we'll work with UCSB and make sure that if any students are displaced because their place needs repair, that we'll figure that out. And again, it's not thousands of units. It's 900. So I'm looking forward to this.
I have to say, Supervisor Capps, that your constituent service has been incredible. As somebody who covers politics and talks to elected officials all the time, it really feels authentic. It feels as though you're doing it because you love it. And I don't know, I love the accountability of it, because parents do think you send your kids to this great university out by the beach, and they may not take the time to actually look at the specifics of the housing situation. And once you peel the layers of the onion back a little bit, it's unbelievable that people live in these conditions going to this great university right here on the coast. And it's just a disconnect. What's really happening versus what people think it is. And
it's not just students living in IV either. I mean, there are
yeah,
low income people who are crammed in as well, who are
Exactly.
working people. Yeah.
yeah, and I think people tend to think IB is a student community, but as Cap said earlier, it used to be the working class
It used
class area for families, but they got driven out by high rents because the landlords are saying, "Hey, these students can come in, the families are going to pay a lot more," and it's just sort of unfair all around. That, and I just want to say, I went to Isla Vista Elementary School. It's just so wrong that people think Isla Vista is just a place for students. There are still families there, and it's just we all have to learn how to get along, and work together. I want to ask you, the housing UCSB is going to build, is that going to be on UCSB property, or where is it going to be?
Oh, it's right where Munger was
Supposed to
supposed
go.
to be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Are
it's
there
all there.
windows? Are there any windows in it?
There will be windows.
And it's
There will be beautiful windows.
3,500 beds for
Yeah.
students, and then there's an additional, what, 1,800 or something like that
For staff and faculty. Yeah.
staff and faculty.
It's a lot. And it's overdue. I mean, that's the whole point, is that they went up in enrollment and they didn't go up in their housing, and it just created this bottleneck. And it's seeping into, Josh, it's also Goleta, it's not just Isla Vista. So it's, I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning, and she lives in a complex in Goleta, and there's a lot of students are moving in there. And so these single family units are now being taken over again by students, which is good. We need students to have a place to live, but it's displacing families.
Well, let me just piggyback on that real quick. I live in a planned unit development near Isla Vista, and they're nice homes, right? They're really cool homes, and we have people on our block renting out a 3-bedroom house for $10,000 a month to multiple students because it's the most money they can get. We have had families inquiring about those same places and being turned down by that house owner because you can get more with the students. But I mean, it's like these poor families, maybe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, maybe $6,000.
I know.
It's so unfair, and I don't think people see that. And I guess, yes, you own a house, you have a right, make as much money as you want. We understand that. But there are real world impacts of those decisions.
There are, and they spread. And then you add to it the eroding cliff, where literally these places, there's 74 units along Del Playa. They'll be in the ocean eventually. And so they're just squeezing out as much money as they can get out of these mostly student tenants now, because their investment is literally going to go away someday. I don't know when. I don't, if it's 30 years, is it 50 years? So they're charging so much and then not really maintaining them the way that I think that I would want my son to live in, if with a balcony that's very secure and can handle, 50 people on a Saturday night.
Yeah, so you've been very much in the news in terms of the bluff safety, and we've had it seems like annual multiple deaths of people.
Two tragedies this last year.
What's been the reaction from the landlords about what seemed to be, pretty moderate proposals you've made or tried to enact about safety in terms of fences and other things?
I'd say in a word, pretty disappointing.
Really?
I mean, if you have a tragedy, I would hope and believe in my structure of humanity that you would rush in to try to make your place as safe as possible. Instead, at best, we've kind of gotten the runaround. And some, have actually really resisted. Some are doing it. Some are doing it now, but it took a lot more prodding than I would have expected in the face of a tragedy.
Just because they didn't want to spend the money.
I assume, or the bureaucracy, that's why we waive fees. My 8-point plan, raising your fence heights, you have to go through the county for that. And so we waive the permitting fee. Again, we're waiving a fee on landlords that are charging, $22,000 for a 4 or 5 bedroom place. We're waiving the $2,000 fee. Do we need to be waiving that? I don't know, but we're just trying to get them to do it. I just want to do it. Like it sounds dramatic, but during the school year, like every Friday, Saturday night, I'm sort of holding my breath thinking like, oh, I hope nobody falls off the cliff. Because in addition to the 14 fatalities, there's hundreds unknown falls all the time, where thankfully the young people survive. But it's incredibly traumatic. We talked to the fire department and the sheriff's department. This is just part of a way of life out there. It's bizarre. Like when I'm not in Santa Barbara, I'm telling people sort of what I do for my job and that we're trying to keep people from falling off a cliff. It's odd, right? That this is an issue. And it seems solvable. Yet, we put all these things in place and we're working with landowners, and yet we had another one just not too long ago. It's maddening.
Yeah. All right. Let me take a step back on the housing stuff that we've been talking about, because you famously voted against the county housing element, which will probably come back in some election to bite you. But be that as it may, but it was, I think, for two reasons, and correct me if I'm wrong. One is a lot of the units are getting stuffed into your
Yeah.
district on farmland, and secondly, it's not the right kind of housing. I mean, people talk about a housing crisis, but it's really sort of an affordable housing crisis, right? And it just seems to me that the unintended consequences of what we're doing could very well be that we're actually driving rents up because the number of so-called affordable units is so small.
Yeah, I mean, the density was the number one reason I voted against sort of the architecture of the plan, the element itself. It was a 3-2 vote, and I just was unhappy, even though I know for sure we need more housing and definitely more affordable housing. It was all jammed into a 3-mile radius in Goleta, and I didn't believe that. I don't believe that was fair. And I think with more planning and we could have been more creative and found, shopping malls that are only a third full and transition them into housing. Instead, it was kind of the easier path to just transition agriculture. So I voted against that plan. But then when we came down to actually rezoning the projects, we actually did better, Jerry, than I would have thought. And we upped the affordability to about 50%, which is pretty good for any project. So total, we're going to have like 53% in my district are going to be affordable.
And is that, when you say affordable, is that the so-called missing middle?
No, it's the lower and the middle, which is what we need. I mean, it's workforce. Right. Yeah. So it got better on the affordable. It's still not, you have a point that we need to be careful of, that we're going to create, we're just going to have more people moving in and working remotely and displacing, again, working families that actually keep our communities running. But we have other tools that I'm for us to be really aggressive on to do, like local preference, where with the new project, it gets advertised to our local employers and employees first. So hopefully they are the ones that are taking it. Or, what I'm really pushing is the county-owned land being turned into housing. The county has no housing, and we've got a ton of land. It's just not something that they've done before, especially when there was plenty of housing, right? 50 years ago. But they have a lot of land, as you might notice as you're driving around, especially in District 2 and Goleta areas. And so why not turn that into either housing for county employees or housing for workforce in general. So right now the plan has 320 units, but I think we could do thousands eventually. So that's what I'm spearheading.
This is not your district, with the Glen Annie housing project that did get rezoned.
Yeah.
The one that didn't make the final list was the Orchard, which is in your district. And I was wondering if you could talk just a minute or so on what was different about that project that did not deserve a rezone versus the other ag land that did.
Yeah, I mean, they're all huge. They all gave me heartburn. Like all of them, I wanted them to be more affordable. And they all kind of came in around, 20%, which is basically the requirement anyway. So I was happy that we were able to push like Glen Annie up to like 35% affordable, and they're giving 7 acres to the school district. you know, a huge amount of units, I think 300 units for workforce. But on Georgie in particular, I just had a lot of questions, as did my colleagues, about their intent, and of a lot of building was happening in the flight path, whether or not that was feasible. A lot of the low income affordable housing was going to, you know, the current plans were in the flight path, that I had questions about it actually making it to the finish line. And then, hey, whoops, the things that get eliminated are the affordable. That's not what I wanted to see. And also just too, in some of their presentations, they really advertised the fact that they were going to be recruiting from elsewhere. They literally said that they were going to be, you know, advertising in the Santa Barbara Airport magazine. And that's just not who we need to be housing right now. We need to be housing people who live and work here. And that's the goal.
Yeah. And it also was going to create two sides of Old Town. You know, you're going to have a certain new housing on one side of 217 and then the other. And I think that was probably part of the consideration about services and, you know, how it was going to impact Old Town Goleta as well.
Yeah, that's why some of the city, Goleta City Council people were not as excited about that project, because of those issues too. And, you know, their initial project, the proposal it was all about UCSB housing. So back to our earlier conversation. So again, the proposal was kind of all over the place. I just didn't have as much confidence in it. They are probably going to move through builder's remedy. So all of these, I mean, we're really over a barrel when it comes to the state mandates and the ability for developers to get in there.
Yeah, talk about let's put a pin, talk about that for a second, because you know, Josh has reported you know, that there's this letter from the state that says, you know, your housing element wasn't in place, you know, at such and such a date, and therefore all these other projects get to go through builder's remedy. How much of a problem is that? How many projects are there?
Well, that's done now because our element's been approved. So there was that vulnerable period of time where we were under builder's remedy, and some projects like the Georgie project did get submitted that way. I think it's a handful that did get submitted that way. We'll see which ones actually prevail, you know, similar to in the city of Santa Barbara, the one on the Lower Riviera as well.
And clarify exactly what that means, Bill. Does that mean they have an absolute right to build it, and planning and so on can't weigh in and either stop it or certainly improve it?
You know, there are some levers, like they still have to qualify under CEQA, and they still have to have water and fire egress and things like that. So it's not a full blanket approval, but it does bypass some of the steps along the way, which is super frustrating to residents. I mean, again, we just met with some last night out at the Sungate development who are really unhappy. I mean, they're going to be surrounded by new housing, and they're trying to figure out how they can engage. And on some of these projects, there won't be that many opportunities.
Yeah. And you're an environmental advocate, a long time working in that set of issues, but you know, it just doesn't seem there's any or not much discussion about resources. You know,
Right.
Do we have the water for it? Do we have the sewage infrastructure and so on? How concerned are you about those kinds of issues?
Yeah, I mean, the process was completely bifurcated because, again, we do need housing. We need affordable housing. The state has, you know, we have not built enough housing over the last 30 years. So I get that. But the state has really come down with a hammer. And so water considerations were not even part of the housing element. I'm getting super wonky here and trying to use terms. But it's like, it wasn't even a consideration.
Crazy.
When residents say, well, what about water? I say, yeah, you're right. It wasn't even part of, you know, that'll come later, basically. It's sort of just this
totally
rush.
Backwards.
It is totally backwards. Which also does mean that things aren't going to happen as quickly as people fear. It's not like the flip is going to get switched and we're just going to, like, all of a sudden there's going to be 4,000 new units. It's going to take some time. And I'm just, you know, that's again why I'm excited. The things that we do own, like what the school district is doing with housing, what the county can do, we can move more quickly. And that we know we can make those entirely affordable. right? And that's where I'm just putting my focus, because it's much more constructive and frankly productive, because we're not working with I mean, it's us who, has the authority there.
All right. Josh, we got about 5 minutes. You've been very generous for your time. Let's talk a little politics.
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to ask you about Supervisor-elect Roy Lee and how things are working with him so far. I know as a journalist, I have people who are just tell me that they're reaching out to him, that he's showing up at their meetings, events. He's trying to get involved already to the degree he can, and he seems kind of all in. And I'm sure you're working with him, but what is your take on Roy Lee so far, and what's your expectation when he actually gets sworn in?
Well, he has a reputation of being a hard worker, and he sure is, man. I mean, he is everywhere right now. I keep meeting people who say, "Oh yeah, I just met with Roy Lee," and I'm thinking, wow, he's running a restaurant, he's raising his girls, he's meeting with me, he's getting up to speed as quickly as possible, and he's
I had practice with him last week, by the way, so
there you go.
He is indeed everywhere.
He is everywhere. He's at all these events I go to. He's doing what he can to get ready for a big job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what is your expectation on how he might affect maybe cannabis policy or some of these issues that people have had with the previous supervisor?
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be a good partner on cannabis. I mean, I don't just think that. I'm excited for that. We've shared conversations about sort of things we might be able to do. When it comes to, he's all in on odor control, which is the #1 issue that's really plagued the ordinance, just the way in which cannabis operations are right next to schools and right in neighborhoods. And he's for requiring scrubbers, at least at this point. So I think he'll hit the ground running on that, because as a councilman, it's been such an issue for the council. So he certainly knows it. He certainly lives in it much more than I do. And he'll be a good partner.
Yeah. Seems like you've been kind of frustrated with the inability of the board to move ahead with, I think, both on taxation and also on odor control.
Yeah.
What's that been like, trying to get that through?
It's been frustrating is a good word for it. I mean, I knew going into it, you have to have 3 votes. The issue has taken on kind of a life of its own in the county in terms of intraction and frustration, and sort of some people who want to just throw their hands up and move on. But I don't believe we can move on while people are still really being inconvenienced, and we're not getting what was the original goal, which was revenue to pay for things that benefit the entire community, libraries, parks, et cetera. We're not getting that right now.
All the revenue's going to enforcement, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, right now the program is barely paying for itself. So I don't want to lose sight of that goal. We should be getting enough taxes to not just pay for the program enforcement, but more. And people shouldn't be suffering from headaches and having reactions to the odor when we have a technology that's proven to work really well. Why is it, I don't believe the onus is on the people who are suffering from headaches and the smell to deal with it. I believe the onus should be on the business making the nuisance. That's how a lot of other laws are. So I think we'll have a new chapter coming in January, and I'm excited for that.
All right. Okay, Supervisor Laura Capps, thank you so much for your time. And sorry to burden you with all those awful questions about national politics, but given your background and I'm sure continuing interest in that, I couldn't help myself. But congratulations on the IV situation. I think you've really made a real difference there.
Well, thanks for letting me talk about it. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
All right, and we will see you next week on Newsmakers. If I
Newsmakers.
They keep changing the buttons on this thing, so I can't. Oh, okay, I got it. All right, thanks. Bye.
See you later.
Bye.